Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker, and we'll be exploring horror culture in cinema. Having a tough speaking day, it seems.
I am as well. I wanted to talk this month about car culture. I'm a big car enthusiast. I don't have any vintage cars, at least, well, I probably never will because I wouldn't be able to work on them at this point with my arthritis situation, and I don't really have the knowledge. So it's kind of a double whammy there. But I love vintage automobiles. When I was a kid, I was enamored of the old brass vehicles from the early part of the 20th centuries, part of the 20th century, that is. And I've been a car fan ever since. And I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Actually, I leave tomorrow morning for a couple of weeks up north. It's been so hot here, and I'm sure it has there in Tenafly as well. And the area that I'm leaving for, I was counting on to be cool, but when I looked at the forecast, it's going to be hotter up there than it is here. So the joke was on me, I suppose. But anyway, I'm going to take in a couple of number of car museums on this trip. And two of them I'm going to are actually the best in the country, if not the world. The Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and the Gilmore Car Museum, which is, in terms of, Henry Ford has more than just cars, but the Gilmore is just cars. And I think for a car museum, it is the best one that I have been to. It is just amazing. It has a beautiful campus. It's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's okay. It takes about half an hour to get there from Kalamazoo. And they actually have a barn, and a lot of their displays are set up in these barns, but these barns are beautifully constructed, air conditioned. You know, they're not. It's not just a hayloft with a horse and this old, curved dash Oldsmobile or something like that. These are really nice, old money, or actually, I should say oil money. That started the Gilmore Car Museum. It started in the 1960s. It's a very financially healthy museum, so it sees a lot of traffic. They have a lot of turnover. They sponsor a lot of, or I should say, host a lot of car shows as well. And the day that we're going to the Gilmore, which is this coming Sunday, they're having a British car show, which I've been to before, actually once before, and it's kind of amazing to see all these British makes out in the in the cornfields of Michigan, and they're beautiful too. But I started when I was planning this vacation. I started thinking, I love car culture movies, and that's what I wanted to talk about today.
And I will learn a lot because I know very little on the topic.
Well, you might know a little bit more than you think. The I didn't go too far back because America is more so than probably any other country. This is the country where car culture started, and I think it'll be the one where it ends as well. Americans, by and large, have a great love for the automobile, so much so that a lot of them let the automobile that they drive kind of define them in terms of socioeconomic status, and whatever. I'm not in for. I've I've never driven anything that I think would be all that impressive, to anybody. I mean, I've driven some nice cars, but I just like cars in general, and they don't have to be super expensive luxury cars. As a matter of fact, I kind of like the cars that people drove, the workaday people drove, let's say 90, 80, 70, 60 years ago. I think those cars are just pillars of design. I mean, beautifully sculpted. Cars these days all look alike, essentially. You might blame various countries' crash tests. I should say crash test worthiness policies and such. We had NHTSA, of course, and they sort of set the standards for how automobiles should stand up in an accident in this country and the safety equipment that those cars should have. The cars that our parents grew up driving, or our parents drove as we were growing up, were not safe vessels at all. they, they might have had seat belts, but nobody ever wore them. I remember
Uh,
my mom, when I was a little kid, my mom had a really pretty Buick Skylark. It was blue with a black top and a black interior, and it had the seatbelt option, which was an option at the time. They did not come automatically with the car in 1967. But I was not allowed to touch the seat belts, at least the shoulder belts, because they were clipped into the headline of the car. There were clips installed by Buick there. And if you undid them, trying to fold them back together and tuck them in and make them look right was a pain in the ass. So you were not allowed to touch them in my mother's car. So if you were, and I was, like I said, a small child, and it had a vinyl interior. So she had a tendency to hit the brakes really hard if she saw, we lived in the South at the time. And if she saw a snake, she would try, she still is hysterical about snakes. And whenever she would see one in the road, she would try to shred it with the tire. So we would be driving along, and all of a sudden she would scream and then slam on the brakes. I don't know that she ever hit one snake, but it happened a lot. And my face went into the dashboard probably 10 times
uh,
with her trying to do that. Um, but just going back into car culture, Americans love their cars, and they love a variety of them. They don't have to be super expensive, wealthy cars. A lot of these are just every man. I don't want to say every man because it's kind of sexist, but every man cars. And
uh,
the first one I wanted to talk about was just that, which was Disney's The Love Bug. That was a hugely popular film when I was a small child. It was released in 1968 and starred Dean Jones, Michelle Lee, who is still with us, and Buddy Hackett. And it's a comedy, and it's a light comedy, but it sort of helped cement a cult that formed around the Volkswagen Bug. Um, Enormously popular when I was a little kid, and it's kind of catapulted VW from an automaker that was in danger of going out of business into a world player, as they still are today. Not so much in the United States, but definitely in Asia and certainly in Europe. Um, and the Love Bug was about a 1963 white Beetle. And do you remember Beetles when you were young?
I remember the Beatles and the Volkswagen van. I remember they were a big thing with younger people, especially.
Well, and they were also big with older people who were very no nonsense about their vehicles. For example, my grandparents on my dad's side had two Beetles. They had I think it was a green 69 Beetle, and then they upgraded to an orange 71 Super Beetle. The Super Beetle was ever so slightly bigger than the regular Beetle. But it added some necessary room to some welcome room, I should say, to the cabin. Americans tend to be pretty tall people, and it made the cabin more hospitable for four people, slightly. Um, Everybody I know who had a VW Beetle as a first car or something of that nature idolizes it, talks about how wonderful it was. Then they will tell you about the myriad problems that they had keeping this thing on the road. They were really simple to maintain, but they were very crude. Volkswagen Beetles were developed by Ferdinand Porsche in the late 1930s as a people's car for Germany. America, even poor Americans had vehicles, even during the Depression. If you think back to the Grapes of Wrath, the Joad family is leaving, the Dust Bowl in a car, in a vehicle. Um, People in Europe and Russia, when they saw this movie, just couldn't believe that these poor people and had a car and they didn't, in their country. They were just sort of amazed by that. And Europe has never been as dependent on vehicles as we are. You in most areas, unless you live in a very large metro, in most areas, you almost have to have a vehicle. You almost have to drive or have somebody drive you. You have to have somebody who's licensed and has a vehicle. In Europe, by and large, you don't need a car. And as a matter of fact, oftentimes it's a huge, expensive handicap. It's an expensive handicap here as well.
Now, we went to Greece, I remember. Like here in America, there were cars everywhere and everybody had a car. In Greece, especially out in the villages, there were very few cars. Most people would walk or rode donkeys or horses or
Mhm.
little carts pulled by goats. That was the extent of the locomotion.
Anyway, with the love bug, I kind of got caught up in that wave of loving Volkswagen Beetles too, and it was primarily because of that movie. When that movie came out, my grandparents still hadn't bought a Beetle yet. I think my grandmother had a Falcon station wagon or something like that before they bought the Beetle, which was horribly uncomfortable, might I add. Those are the hardest seats known to man. They looked comfortable, but they weren't. Um, anyway, my aunt, my mother's sister, had a tan Beetle, which I think was, I don't know, mid 60s, I would say. And I just thought the car was the cutest thing ever. I really liked the car. It didn't matter too much that I nearly froze to death in it one time because its heater essentially only worked in the summer. And that was a problem for a lot of Volkswagen Beetles. The HVAC was just a joke. And um, I've always been amazed by the cult that grew around them because even by late 1960s, early 1970s standards, Volkswagen really couldn't compete when it came to creature comforts. They never had a fully automatic transmission in their vehicles. The best that they could do was a semi-automatic, which still made you row between two gears instead of four, but you still had to do it. No power steering. They made air conditioning an option pretty late into the run in the 1970s, but it didn't work very well, and it's just kind of why bother, you know. They were very simple to repair, however, and they appealed to people who were very no nonsense about vehicles, kind of like my grandfather, who wanted reliability was tantamount to style. And it was Beetles, you had that late 1930s styling with pontoon fenders, running boards, which had disappeared by 1940. And it was sort of a throwback. And like I said, a lot of people who owned them could actually maintain them themselves very cheaply. Parts were plentiful after a while, even for a German make. They started selling them in the United States in the early 1950s, and I'm sure the anti-German sentiment from World War II was kind of hard for the company to overcome. But by 1960, they were doing really well here. Volkswagen was selling a product that American auto manufacturers didn't have, and that was a small, inexpensive car, and a very simplistic one. And the American automakers, all for the 1960 model year, came out with small cars. The only two that had small cars before 1960 were Studebaker. They came out with the Lark in 1959, which was successful, and it kept the company. The company was about to go out of business, and it kept them going for another 7 years. And American Motors. They had a Rambler America that they had pulled out of mothballs. And it was a very old design that dated back to 1949, 1950. They rebodied it, even though it was unibody, which is kind of hard to do. And flogged it for everything it was worth for several years and made a profit from it. A lot of American automakers didn't want to, well, I don't think any of them really wanted to bother with small cars because there was the mantra of small cars, small profit. But actually, that's what kept American Motors going for a long time, were small cars. So you could actually make a living at it for a while. And like I said, the love bug, really kind of, I think it was one of the things that helped cement America's love for the Beetle, which was sort of an anti-car, in a sense. Uh, Lots of hippies loved them because they were sort of anti-establishment. They didn't um, follow. There were no trends to follow. They looked largely the same, year after year after year, and they're still popular. When you go to car shows, you see you see them, and a lot of them have been restored to the point where they look better than they did when they were new. And that you see a lot of cars like that, though. Um, I'm not a uh, I think Volkswagen Bugs are cute and all that, but I think they're actually kind of miserable for me, at least to live with. I like something that accelerates better and has more creature comforts, especially right now. I've got to have AC. I'm going to move on to one of my favorite movies, and a Bullet, released in 1968. And it stars Steve McQueen, Jacqueline Bissett, Robert Vaughn in a really good um, antagonistic role, which, from what I've read, kind of came natural to him. Um, George Stanford Brown, the actor who has worked for decades, very very impressive actor. Robert Duvall is also in it, and Simon Oakley. So it's got an impressive cast. I think Jacqueline Bissett is one of the few women in the movie, and you don't find a lot of women in car culture movies, which I think is a shame. Um, there's an archetypal car chase in Bullet between Steve McQueen, who has a 1960 dark green 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback, and Bill Hickman. Um, Bill Hickman has a black 1968 Dodge Charger in this. And there is a car chase between the two, and somebody has to die at the end because I should say, somebody is going to die in this car chase. And it heightens the tension of the movie. It is a blast to watch. I'm a big car chase fan. Anyway. It's a blast to watch. And Bill Hickman was an actor. Well, I should say stuntman and actor. And his specialty was driving. And he did a lot of stunt driving during his career. He only lived to be 65 years old, but he made 120 films. He didn't always drive in the films in which he appeared. He was so well known and well liked and regarded that he appeared in a lot of movies just in small roles. But when it came time for car chases, he played a major part in them and did a lot of the choreography for the car chases. They don't just happen; they are, very carefully choreographed because they're very dangerous. Um, and Bullet is an extremely dangerous car chase. And Steve McQueen did a lot of his own driving in the movie. He was a very highly skilled driver. But this is really Bill Hickman's car chase because he's the one that orchestrates it. He's also in the movie as the driver of the '68 Dodge Charger. And he's a bad guy who's trying to kill a cop. And Steve McQueen is a cop in Bullet. And the one of the first Blu-rays that I bought was Bullet because it is just a fabulous movie. I like Steve McQueen a lot anyway. In fact, I can't remember a bad movie or a bad performance on his part. He's not larger than life, but he's very charismatic on screen. At least I think so. I mean, not handsome, but there's something that draws you into him. And this movie, I know you haven't seen Bullet, but give it a shot because it is a fantastic movie. That car chase will keep you at the edge of your seat. It's as thrilling as anything that I've ever seen. It is a lot of fun. It's a lot of popcorn for that movie. And Steve McQueen's forest green metallic Mustang in this caused such a sensation, among people who are Mustang lovers, that Ford, it took them a long time to do it, but Ford actually trotted out a bullet edition of the Mustang. It's dark green. It has a lot of horsepower and it's very expensive. but but um, I see them around, in traffic from time, every once in a while, from time to time, and they have a really nice throaty exhaust. They're fantastic looking. I love that dark green paint that they use, which is reflective of the original 1968 Mustang that Steve McQueen used in the movie. And there again, just a fantastic film. Great cast. Everybody's excellent in it, and just a lot of fun. It was shot largely in San Francisco, so when Steve McQueen and Bill Hickman are in their car chase, they are going up roads. Have you been to San Francisco?
No, alas, I haven't. I've been to San Diego. This far.
Uh, the last time I was there, I had a Mazda as a rental car, and I was going down one of those incredibly steep streets. It wasn't Lombard Street, the one that curves. You can't necessarily drive down that anymore. The only pieces of it. But I was trying to get, I think, back to our hotel, and I pulled down to this one street that was just at a 90-degree angle. It was so steep. I didn't think the brakes were going to stop when I came to a light. I had both my feet, on the brake pedal, trying to get it to stop. So I can't imagine what it was like trying to drive these late 60s vehicles on streets like that. They had tons of Steve McQueen's Mustang had a 390 V8. That 68 Dodge probably had a wedge in it. The enormously powerful engines, but the cars didn't handle that well back then. They didn't stop that well. Most of them had drum brakes all around. Drum brakes stopped well the first few times you stepped on the brake, but when they got hot, they didn't work very well anymore. So you're going at these incredible speeds, and you can't stop the car. So you sort of have to use the steering wheel and the rear tires in order to stop, which means sliding, doing a lot of that. But with the cars that we drive now, as my grandfather used to say, practically drive themselves. They have all of these convenience options and amenities. They had power steering, power brakes, automatic transmissions, air conditioning, stereos, a lot of collision mitigation software these days, cameras, so you can not have to look at the rear view mirror when you back up. You can just look at the screen. Uh, these cars back then, you had to have both, both hands on the wheel and both feet on the pedals. And then an extra hand for the gear shift would have been handy. They were a handful to drive. They were not easy vehicles to drive. Some of them were wildly underpowered. Some of them were incredibly overpowered, which is its own problem, especially when you had bias ply tires that didn't stick to the road very well, like you had back then. So it's amazing that people didn't die more often in some of these car chase scenes because, like I said, the cars back then were much more difficult to drive, essentially.
Wow.
Uh, hmm?
Wow.
Oh, I got a lot more.
No, I know that, but I've never, again, this isn't my particular area of expertise, and
Mhm.
I hadn't realized that there's so much going on.
Well, cars used to be a lot more crude than they are now. Back then, especially in the 1950s and 1960s, style was everything. And cars were usually restyled every 2 or 3 years. Even after every year, many cars got a really heavy facelift so that there was a distinction between, like, let's say, a 1964 and a 1965.
Mhm.
Um, Not with every automaker. Volkswagen would be a notable exception there. And American Motors, AMC, would probably be an exception as well, and maybe Studebaker. The other cars were Bolton fins on them, slathering chrome on them. And some of the old cars, if you look at some of the late 50s vehicles, some of them look like they just landed from Mars. They're beautiful to, they're stunning to look at sculptures, but having you your family of four drive around, in this car that's got fins that are this big, that don't really do anything for the car other than just look kind of wild. They don't really have a practical application, but it just looked nice, I suppose. And that's something that kind of excess you will never see in automotive design again, ever, ever, ever. And that makes those cars so special too. They just don't, like I said, no company's ever going to make stuff that looks like that again. Where the style is tantamount to everything else. Unfortunately, including safety. Those cars weren't that safe back then, and even as big as they weren't all that heavy and tended to just crumble, or I should say crumple, in accidents. Even low speed accidents in some of those cars from the 50s and 60s, you could, even if you got into an accident, let's say 20 or 25, you could have serious injuries in them because a lot of the dashboards weren't covered or padded back then, so you were hitting your head on metal. Those old steering wheels were huge and hard as a rock, and oftentimes the shaft from the steering wheel would impale people because they didn't have collapsible steering columns back then. So there again, um, seeing these car chases and it's wondering how people survive back then. It's a wonder any of us are here really. Um, I was in a car. This has been a long time ago, but I was in a car with a friend. He has a one owner 1978, I think, Chrysler Cordoba, which is now about a 50-year-old car. And he took me for a ride in it. We were going to a restaurant, and he was going pretty fast, I thought. And it suddenly hit me as like, wait a minute, I don't. There's no airbag in this. I does this thing? This is an old car. Does the brakes still work? I started getting kind of worked up about it. Now it was totally fine. We got there, we got back, and it was okay. But I actually had some anxiety, not a whole lot of anxiety, but a little bit of anxiety, about it, because the the safety equipment that I just assume is in all cars now was not present at all in that old Chrysler.
Well, I'm glad you made it okay, and that sounded frightening the way you described it.
Well, it's at first I was like, yeah, let's go for a ride. This will be fun. I mean, the engine in it wasn't all that. In the 1970s, the emissions legislation um, saw the detuning of a lot of those big V8 engines. So they were still big V8s. They didn't have a whole lot of power, though, because emission technology back then was not what it is now. But moving right along with some of my favorite automotive themed films. Duel, I think, is a brilliant film. It was directed by Steven Spielberg when he was probably 23 years old or so. And Duel was actually a television movie, which a lot of people forget. It was made by Universal, but it was a TV movie. And at that time, Spielberg had only done work for television. And Duel actually is a very small cast, and you find that with a lot of TV movies from the 1970s. didn't have a lot of money to work with, so they would boil the cast down to the point where they only had a few actors to pay, but they would get name actors so that people would want to watch. And in this case, Dennis Weaver, who was also McLeod on NBC, was also in this NBC movie of the week. And it's a fantastic film. With Duel, Dennis Weaver is a salesman. He's having some marital problems. He's on the phone a lot with his wife. His wife is constantly chewing him out because he's never at home. And all of that is just sort of what Alfred Hitchcock would call a MacGuffin for what happens in the movie. The setup that you get with this movie, in that he's having this problem with his wife, and it sounds like she's going to want to end this marriage. They have kids. Um, it has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the film, which I think is kind of cool. What happens in the movie is that he's driving I think a 1970 or 71 Plymouth Valiant, which was an economy car. It was a small car back in those days. It seated 6 people, but it was still a small car for 1970. He is menaced by a tractor trailer driver, and that's the entire movie. He just keeps getting menaced by this, and he tries to psych the other driver out, and kind of comes to figure out that there's nobody in the cab. Kind of interestingly, so it seems it doesn't seem supernatural, and then it does at the same time. But the car chase scene, which lasts quite a while, in Duel, I think is brilliant. And Dennis Weaver, who he was in, I think, Gunsmoke before he was in the star of McLeod. I never thought of him as being a particularly great actor, but he is fantastic in this movie. He it's the movie is mostly him, so it is his reaction to what is going on with the tractor trailer. That this tractor trailer is trying to kill him, and
Without
nearly succeeds.
without spoiling it for anybody who might not like a spoiler, how does that wrap up? Is it supernatural or?
No, Dennis Weaver, he's sort of a David and Goliath kind of thing, where David wins.
Oh,
Uh, but does he really? Because there's nobody in the truck. So uh, I don't want to give more away than that, and it's not explained, which I think is another brilliant part of the movie. I don't necessarily think that the what happened, what transpired, actually has to be explained, because sometimes, as you know, in life, sometimes things happen for absolutely no reason, and it just seems to be one of those things for Dennis Weaver in this movie.
and it's like disclosure. Here it is. Here's what we have in visual evidence. You decide what it means to you, if anything.
I guess if you wanted to get into a really close read on the movie, the setup for it, where he's having problems with his wife, and she's clearly very unhappy in the relationship, and wants out. At least that's my take on it. Anyway, I guess that problem begins to seem minor when somebody is trying to kill you.
Yes.
I guess it sort of contextualizes, your problems, and it puts them in a sort of hierarchy. Uh, and there again, I think it's just a brilliant film. Unbelievable that it's a TV movie. And there were some excellent TV movies made in the 70s and 80s. Not to take anything away from them, but this one's it looks very cinematic when you watch it, and it kind of crosses the line from thriller to horror at times. So you do see it cross-referenced as a horror film fairly often. Another one of my favorite movies that has a fantastic car chase, also from 1971, is The French Connection. Now, I think you said you had seen The French Connection.
I'd seen the French Connection. It took place in New York City, and especially on the subways. And I lived in New York City and traveled extensively with the subways to and from school, to and from work when I had a job, and so forth. and to just about anything I needed to do, there was a train or a bus. So Popeye Doyle was in it, the character,
Gene Hackman, yes.
and he was played by Al Bundy, and so I had to see it.
Well, The French Connection has a great cast. Roy Scheider is also in it. Tony LoBianco, Fernando Rey, and the driver Bill Hickman actually has somewhat of a sizable role in the movie. And Gene Hackman is a cop, but he's a very flawed human being, and he kind of lets, I don't want to say his morality because he doesn't really have one himself, but he kind of lets the job swallow him whole. I guess is a better way to put it. As a cop, and he is determined to bring down who he sees as the bad guy at any cost. If other people die in the process, well, acceptable losses. So, like I said, everybody in the French Connection has a huge flaw. But I also think that's fantastic filmmaking, and you a great time. I do like films where the antagonist is pure and learns a lesson and is able to overcome whatever that person needs to overcome. But I also like to see films where everyone has a character flaw, and no one's perfect here. Even the people who are trying to do the right thing often do the wrong thing.
I
Uh,
was in the French Connection too. She was Nan Wilson. She was a minor actress, and she was in one of the subway scenes that they had in.
hmm. Was she the woman with the baby carriage by any chance? That would be odd. That would be cool.
I don't remember what part she played. It's been years since I've seen her or the movie.
That car chase with Gene Hackman and the baby carriage, I think is just brilliant. Just, in order to kind of heighten the tension in the film, he is beating the crap out of this Pontiac that he is driving, and there's just nothing left of it, at the end of the car chase. But it is a spectacular car chase. It's a great film. If you have not seen, for those people who have not seen the movie, you should watch it. It's a fantastic performance by Gene Hackman. It really, he'd been, a working actor for years before. I shouldn't say that, not 30 some years, but for years before this film. And this film put him on the map when he was getting close to middle age. But it was his breakthrough film, certainly. Tangentially related to the French Connection is a movie called The Seven Ups. The Seven Ups is not a sequel to the French Connection, but boy, there's a kinship between the two movies. Gene Hackman is not in The Seven Ups, but Roy Scheider comes back for the movie, and as does Tony LoBianco. Also in the movie are Ken Kercheval, who used to be on Dallas back in the late 70s. Richard Lynch, who was a really good antagonist. Practically any film he made, he was always the bad guy. He was never a good guy. He'd been horribly burned in a fire back in the 60s before his acting career really got going, and you could tell that something had happened to his face because it you could see some burn scars, and he was able to turn that around and into an acting career that flourished until practically until he died. So Richard Lynch, like I said, was in a lot of movies as an antagonist, as he is in this. And Bill Hickman, once again, the driver, is an integral part of this movie. There's one scene in this movie in which Roy Scheider is supposed to be driving, but it's actually Bill Hickman. He's driving a 1973 Pontiac Ventura, which was a smaller car. It was essentially a Chevy Nova. with some different trim and Pontiac badging on it. And the car runs up underneath a tractor trailer during the car chase and shears the roof off the car. That was not planned. That actually happened to Bill Hickman. He kind of lost control. These this is all happening at a very high speed. And like I said, cars back then did not have road feel and were much more difficult to handle than they are now. And he was supposed to go around the tractor trailer and he went under it and sheared the roof off of it. He ducked at the very last second when he saw what was about to happen and came out of it unscathed. But he might have had a cut or two on him from the various pieces of the car flying off, but lived through it to see another day. And just like I said, a thrilling car chase. I mean, your heart is in your throat, even if you're not into automobilia. These are incredibly dramatic designed to get you worked up, sort of like a horror film does. Whenever there's a jump scare or something like that, that's what these car chases are for. They're supposed to heighten the drama and kind of put you on the edge of your seat. You're watching them, waiting to see what's going to happen next. Well, at least that's what it does for me. I think the Seven Ups is just perfect, and I do like crime dramas that have good car chases. But not all of these movies have to be crime dramas either. A movie that I saw when I was a small child that I have loved ever since and have a lot of memorabilia surrounding is American Graffiti, which came out in 1973. It was the movie that really put George Lucas on the map and kind of showed everybody what George Lucas could do with a limited budget, not too limited, but a limited budget, and some largely new actors who had not broken through, who had worked but had not broken through yet. And if you look at the cast list on this movie, practically everybody who acted in the movie went on to something bigger and better. The stars of this movie include Paul Le Mat, Candy Clark, Cindy Williams from Laverne and Shirley, Ron Howard, who had been a child actor on the Andy Griffith Show, and then morphed into Happy Days. And this is sort of between Andy Griffith and Happy Days. Richard Dreyfuss, who had been in, who you could see him in small roles in such movies as Valley of the Dolls. He has a small role in. He's in Bewitched, which was a TV show in the 60s and early 70s. Just small roles, but he really has a breakthrough role here where he's a major character. Charles Martin Smith, Mackenzie Phillips. She's 12 years old here. She's a child, and she has an interesting story to tell. When she made the movie, the movie was shot over a 4 week, or I should say, a 4 week period. It was about 28 days shoot, but it was all shot at night. From let's say 9 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, which is an issue. A lot of it was done on location, and it was shot largely around Petaluma, San Francisco, and Mill Valley. The Mel's Drive-In that you see in American Graffiti was actually the one from San Francisco, which sadly got torn down. It should never have happened, but it did. Some other people. Well, one thing I wanted to say about Mackenzie Phillips is she is with Paul Le Mat in his car practically the entire time that she's in the film. So she didn't get to interact with many of the other cast members. Another person who is in this is Harrison Ford. He's Bob Falfa, and he had been working as an actor off and on for years, but had just never taken off. And this movie is the one that eventually catapulted him to stardom because George Lucas knew his work and then hired him to be in Star Wars a few years later. Well, when Mackenzie Phillips was probably 17 or 18 years old and went to the theater to see Star Wars, she sees Harrison Ford and exclaims, "He's the guy who sold me pot when I was making American Graffiti." So it kind of an interesting story. Now, that's her story. I'm not saying that it's true or not, but I've heard other things about Harrison Ford, and uh,
I think
I,
everyone's
I've heard
heard,
that story before. Let's put it that way.
yeah, I think everyone's heard stories about Harrison.
Well, he was a highly skilled carpenter. Actually, he's a very good carpenter and had done a lot of work in Southern California for people. And he'd also been an actor. He'd been in some TV and some films in the '60s and early '70s, and had a family. He had three kids, a wife. He needed to make ends meet, and he did one way or the other. So I'll just leave it at that. But what a fantastic movie. There are other cast members to talk about in this movie, too. Lynn Marie Stewart, who might not be a household name, but if you were a big fan of Pee Wee's Playhouse, she was Miss Yvonne in Pee Wee's Playhouse. She's one of the actresses in the film. Wolfman Jack, I was a huge Wolfman Jack fan as a kid, and I listened to his radio show like practically every Saturday night. And he has a really poignant scene in this movie. Very, very interesting, pivotal, to tell you the truth, ultimately a very pivotal scene in the film. And so popular in the '70s. And Suzanne Summers is in the film. She has no lines, really. She is the hot blonde in the white Ford Thunderbird. And the Ford Thunderbird is woven throughout. The hot blonde and the Ford Thunderbird is woven throughout the movie. Well, according to Suzanne Summers, the guy who owned the Thunderbird, which keep in mind back then would have been about a 16-year-old car, was fanatical about it and was afraid she was going to wreck it or otherwise damage it. And she said that he is like no more than 10 feet away from, from, from her, like in practically every scene, because he wasn't going to let anything happen to that car. So, man after my own heart. But like I said, what a fantastic film, and like I said, practically everybody in it went on to something bigger and better, including especially George Lucas.
Now, today's conversation is pretty well coming to an end in like 5 minutes, and there's still so much about the cars in
Oh,
uh,
yes, there are.
part two when you're ready.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and there are many more films than this. The film that I have on the screen right now is Gone in 60 Seconds, a very popular film from 1974. But interestingly, it doesn't really have any movie stars in it. The star of the film is H.B. Halicki or Halicki. He wrote it, directed, starred in it, and it features the longest at that time, the longest car chase that had ever been in a movie, which was about 40 minutes in this movie. So it's like half the film, and it's also the best half of the film. The story around the movie is that H.B. Halicki's character is an insurance investigator, but he also moonlights as a car thief, and he takes an order from a South American businessman to steal 48 vehicles, and the 48 vehicles had to be certain types of vehicles. There was a sort of a shopping list of vehicles. He's got 47 of them so far, and the 48th one is a 1973 yellow Ford Mustang. And that's sort of the crux of the movie. One of his former business associates blows the whistle on it, and he is chased in this 73 Ford Mustang. Um, there again, it's not great acting, but it is very good filmmaking. And the car chase scene, that 40-minute car chase, is just everything in the film.
Wow. Um, I realized that my brain conflated the two different motion pictures when I answered your question about the French Connection.
Mhm.
Somehow my brain moved the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 into the French Connection. And as
Oh
you
wow, okay, that's different.
that's why I thought about Al Bundy and Popeye Doyle. That's from the Taking of Pelham
I
1.
wondered why you said the Al Bundy, but I thought, well, I'll just let it go.
Yeah,
Uh,
with that, but I caught it then. I caught your expression, and then my brain finally clicked. It's like, okay, I mixed these two movies up together. They're probably out around the same time, or I knew people were involved with them at one point.
it could be. Um, just to wrap up, so often in films that are designed for Americans or designed for American audiences, the protagonist and sometimes the antagonist is associated with a certain automobile. I'm a big Columbo fan. Peter Falk, the NBC mystery movie on Sunday night. I've seen every episode of Columbo and all the TV movies. And in every episode of it, he has a 1960 Peugeot convertible. And Peugeot is a French make, and not a particularly lovely car, at least in this iteration. But it was a very rare car in America, and the producers, after Peter Falk had chosen this car, had to try to scrounge Southern California to find more of them because the Colombo car is in pretty bad shape because it really was in bad shape. Um, and James Bond. I'm a huge 007 fan, and he's always connected to some vehicle, usually an Aston Martin, which are generally stunning vehicles, especially in Goldfinger. That 1964 Aston Martin is just beautiful and so heavily identified, with 007.
In our
And,
next, sorry, go ahead.
oh, and I just wanted to dovetail in there. Roger Moore, who was the second 007, had been in a TV series called The Saint, which was an ITV TV series from the 1960s. And his character has a Volvo 1600 coupe, which was a very un-Volvo like car in that it was sort of a sports coupe. It was a two-door, very low slung. It wasn't the boxy Volvos that we tend to think of. Um, and his character was, it was almost synonymous with that Volvo P1800.
I was asked by Athena when I told her what you were planning for today, and she had asked me if you're going to cover Herbie the Love Bug. So I said probably, and then she wanted to know about the Batmobile, the Knight Rider car, and a few other cars that became iconic and influenced our culture.
Okay, if for people who are interested in um, movie cars, one of the best museums that I know of is the Volo Museum, which is just north of Chicago in Volo, Illinois, very close to the Illinois-Wisconsin border. Volo is amazing, and I've seen there are several Batmobiles around, but I've seen the Batmobile there. They have one of Elvis's cars there. They have Dragula, or they have had Dragula there, which is Grandpa Munster's car and the Munsters, the one with the casket. You so Volo has a lot of vehicles like that, and the Peterson will oftentimes the Peterson Automotive Museum, which is in Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard, also has. Oftentimes they'll do let's say a special show on movie cars. The Peterson is a stunning museum. I have not been for probably 12 years or so, but it's an amazing museum, very, very high quality. I still think that the Gilmore is the best.
If you could share that information with me in the personal messenger and an email, I'll put the links on the description of tonight's show. And how can people find you? I found Brian over 25, 26 years ago when I first stumbled across a new site for Brian's Drive-In Theater, which is still here. And I was so afraid that it would be taken away from the internet, as many things were, where there were ruins of sites, that I personally copied each and every page and kept a loose leaf binder with everything on it, primarily because of the Peplum movies, which I was a great fan. And here we are still doing these shows more than a quarter of a century later. And we've been doing them for around 10 years. You've been part of my experience as a human being for a very long time, right?
That's fantastic to hear too. You can always stop by the drive-in, which I do update every day. We have a new movie of the day each day. Our one of our future topics is going to be biker films, and we had a biker film as the film of the day today, CC and Company. And I do want to talk about that at some point. If you want to interact with me on social media, I am just down to Facebook now, but you can find me on Facebook if you look for Brian Walker and Brian's Drive-In Theater.
Thank you very much. This was an awesome show, and I learned a lot because, again, I was ignorant of the topic. Have a wonderful vacation, and I look forward to you getting back so that our conversation continues.
I'll be here. Looking forward to seeing you.
Be well and say hi to Greg.
Thank you. I will. Good night.
Good night.